Story 1. The Woman in the Fog. I was coming back from my cousin's place in Tazewell, heading toward my cabin near Beartown, cutting through the ridge roads that never see a salt truck or cell signal. It was 1 a.m, maybe a little after, and the fog was thick enough to chew. You know the kind, creeping in from the hollers, slow and low, smothering the trees until even your brights bounce back, like you're staring into a mirror. I had the windows cracked for air, radio off, just the hum of tires and the wheeze of old defrost trying to keep the glass clear. I hadn't passed another car in miles, not since the gas station where the clerk looked too tired to ask questions. Just past a place locals call Devil's Bend, a sharp hairpin with no guardrail and a drop too steep to matter. I came around slow, tires hugging gravel. That's when I saw her, standing dead center in the road. A woman, pale, tall, wearing something white that clung to her in the mist. My headlights froze her like a caught deer, but she didn't flinch, just stood with her arms at her sides, head ever so slightly tilted like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. I hit the brakes. The car groaned. I stopped 20 feet from her. The silence wrapped around us like wool. No wind, no crickets, not even the engine anymore. I waited, expected her to wave, step aside, ask for help. Nothing. So I rolled the window down and leaned out a little. "You okay?" I called. My voice didn't carry right. It sounded like it got swallowed by the trees. She didn't answer, but her head tilted further, her eyes catching the beam of my brights in a way that looked wrong, too bright, reflective like an animal's. I couldn't make out her features, just that her face was turned toward me and her hair was wet, even though it wasn't raining. The fog curled around her ankles like something living. I felt my fingers numb on the steering wheel. Then, for some reason I still don't understand, I looked into my rearview mirror, same shape, same pale outline. Standing behind the car now, close, too close. I blinked, and when I looked forward again, the road was empty. Just empty. No sign of her walking away, no sound, no flash of white slipping into the brush. I stayed frozen for a while, afraid that moving would make whatever this was notice me again. Eventually, I inched forward, eyes scanning both mirrors like I was threading a needle. The curve took me into thicker fog, where the trees loomed like shoulders. And I drove 30 more miles without seeing another soul. That should have been it. Just a weird night story. But the next morning, when I walked out to the truck, I noticed handprints on the back window. Not smudges, prints. Clear as wax paper, one small, one larger, like someone had leaned there and pressed in with purpose. The larger one had a smear trailing off sideways, like it had been dragged across the glass. I asked myself 100 times if maybe some kids had messed with the truck overnight, but I live up a gravel road with no neighbors for a half mile. You don't just sneak up there without waking the dogs. Still, I wiped the glass clean and told myself to move on. Days passed, then a week, but the road started showing up in my dreams, always foggy, always the same stretch of bend. Sometimes I'd see her again, sometimes not, but the feeling stuck in my gut like swallowed wire. I started taking the long way home just to avoid that road, adding 20 minutes to every trip. Then came the call. A buddy of mine from school, Daryl, works county maintenance. Said they found a wreck down off Devil's Bend. Old hatchback, engine rusted through. Looked like it had been there a decade or more. Vines curled around the axle like fingers. Said there were bones inside. Small, female, still wearing white. But here's the part that chilled me. They found a child's jacket in the back seat and a pacifier wedged under the floor mat. Coroner figured she'd been coming down the ridge and missed the bend. No ID, no plates. Car had Tennessee tags faded to ghosts. I didn't tell Daryl what I saw, what I keep seeing, because about once a month now, even when I take the long way home, I still feel her there, somewhere behind me or just ahead. I'll be driving and my headlights will bend strange, or the radio will hiss like breath through teeth, and I'll get that pressure behind my ears like I'm not alone in the truck. Sometimes I check the mirror, sometimes I don't. But no matter what, I never stop anymore, and I never roll the window down. Story 2. The Man Without Shoes. It was early spring when I took the old logging road down from Carver's Ridge. One of those nights that starts out warm and gentle but turns to cold once the sun dips behind the mountains. I was coming back late from checking a broken trail cam, one I'd strapped to a maple above a gully where coyotes like to pass through. The job wasn't paying much, but it kept me out of town, which is where I preferred to be. I remember the moon was out, but you couldn't see it for the fog that had sunk low in the trees like breath trapped in a jar. The gravel under my tires crunched softly like brittle bones. And the radio had lost its signal an hour earlier, leaving me with nothing but engine hum and my own thoughts. I was maybe 10 minutes from the bottom when I came around a bend and saw him. He stood right in the middle of the road, barefoot, shirtless, head turned away from me and toward the woods like something in there had called him. My headlights hit his back and lit up his skin in pale bands. And I swear it was so light, he almost glowed. I braked, easing the truck to a crawl. The man didn't flinch. He didn't glance back or wave like someone in trouble might. Just stood there, toes curled into the roadside grit, his arms limp at his sides. I tapped the horn once. No response. Not even a twitch. There's a line you cross in moments like that. Not a physical one, but something in your gut. That tug between stopping to help and the part that says, keep going. I went slow, inching forward, tires on the edge of the shoulder just to pass. As I came alongside him, I looked out the window. His mouth was moving, lips parting and pressing together in a way that looked practiced, like a hymn or a prayer. But no sound came. He just kept whispering to something unseen. My lights brushed the tree line where he was looking, but there was nothing there, just pine trunks and blackness. The kind that seems to press forward if you stare too long. I passed him, kept my eyes straight ahead, my heart beat fast. But I told myself it could have been a lost hiker or someone high, wandering off the ridge trail. But then I checked my rear view. He was turning, not stepping, not walking, just pivoting, slow and stiff, like his whole body was a weather vane. He turned to face the trees, and then, as if something had answered, he took a step forward, bare feet sinking into the cold mud just off the ditch, and vanished into the woods. I didn't breathe again until the lights of the town crest broke through the windshield. I didn't stop at home either. Just kept driving until I hit the 24-hour gas station by the interstate. Bought coffee I didn't want, just to have a reason to stay under fluorescent lights for a while. The clerk didn't say much, just handed me my change with that dead-eyed look they get out here after midnight. I didn't tell anyone, not right away. What would I say? That I saw a man praying to trees, that his skin looked like candle wax, and he walked into the woods like something had beckoned. I let it settle into the dustbin of memory, the way strange things often do around here. But that was before I went back up to retrieve the trail cam. It was supposed to be a quick trip. I had fresh batteries and a memory card ready, planned to swap it out and head home before dark. But when I reached the maple, the strap was there, buckled tight, but the camera was gone. No signs of tearing, just gone. The bark where it hung was marked with little indents, almost like claw marks, but too evenly spaced, too deliberate. Below the tree, pressed into the soil like a fossil, was a bare footprint. Not fresh, but still visible. The heel had sunk deep, and the toes curled slightly, like whoever left it had been trying to grip the earth. I told myself someone had stolen the cam. Happens sometimes. Hunters, bored kids, but the footprint didn't sit right. It looked reverent somehow, careful, like someone kneeling at the edge of an altar. I started to notice other things after that. On late nights, parked up near the ridge or driving the back roads alone, I'd see marks on trees, symbols I didn't recognize, carved low where animals don't usually reach. Once I passed a small pile of rocks, stacked neatly in the middle of the road like a boundary, and twice I saw a figure in the tree line just out of reach of my high beams, standing, barefoot, watching. What haunts me most isn't what I saw that night, or even what I saw after. It's the feeling I got when I passed him, that I had interrupted something, not something violent or even angry, but something sacred in a way I didn't understand, like I had stumbled across a ceremony I was never meant to witness, a moment held between a man and the woods, and the silence that bound them together. I haven't gone back up there since. I've avoided the ridge entirely. Friends joke about me getting soft, but I don't laugh. I just change the subject, and every so often I dream of that moment, of the way his lips moved, the way his skin prickled under the cold, the way he turned so slowly toward the woods. In the dream, I never pass him. I stop, I get out, I ask what he sees, and that's the part that wakes me up, because in the dream, he finally answers, but I can never remember what he says. Story 3. The Boy at the Crossroads. I hadn't meant to be out that late, and I sure hadn't meant to break down at the crossroads outside Waynesville. Folks around here have long memories, and even longer silences when that spot comes up. No signs, no lights, just a faint X faded into the center of the pavement where two narrow roads meet in the middle of nowhere, framed by pine and power line. There's a feeling out there, like something paused long ago and never started again. I'd heard stories, but I'd never had cause to stop. Until that night, the engine didn't sputter or shudder. It just gave out with a low cough and a final hum, like it had decided I'd come far enough. No warning lights, no steam, just the quiet ticking of metal cooling as I rolled to a stop dead center on the painted X. The air was warm, but still. Nothing but the thrum of crickets and the occasional creak of the trees settling back into place. I reached to try the ignition again, but the key turned slack. Dead. I stepped out, one foot on gravel, the other half on the faded paint. I'd barely gotten the door closed when I saw him. A boy, maybe 9, standing barefoot in the middle of the crossroads, backlit by nothing, face shadowed but visible. No shoes, no flashlight, no expression. His arms hung loose at his sides, and his head was tilted slightly, like he was trying to catch the sound of something deep underground. I figured maybe he'd wandered off from one of the homes tucked back into the woods, but I hadn't passed a single porch light for 10 miles. I called out, asked if he was all right, if he was lost. He didn't move, didn't even blink, just stared past me. Not through me, not at me, past me. That look you see sometimes in animals before a storm. I started walking toward him, slow, careful, just enough to show I wasn't trying to scare him off. That's when he moved. Just barely, lips parting like he was about to speak. I stopped in my tracks, waiting. Then he said my name, whispered it, not like a child guessing. He said it with the weight of someone remembering, like it was written into him. My spine turned to wire. I'd never seen him before in my life. The hair on my arms rose before I even knew I was afraid. I asked how he knew me. He didn't answer, just shifted slightly on his bare feet like he was listening to the dirt again. I looked down at the painted X beneath him and realized his toes were lined up with the cracks, like he'd been told exactly where to stand. A chill rose up from the pavement, into my boots, up my spine. I backed up slowly and climbed into the car, locking the door out of instinct. The cab was silent. The interior lights dimmed out for no reason. I didn't look at the boy again right away, just stared at the dash, pretended this was something I could outwait. 15 minutes passed, then 20. I finally worked up the nerve to glance through the windshield. He was gone. I stepped back out into the night, more angry now than afraid. Angry at the way the place made me feel, like I'd stepped into something older than roads. I called the tow service again. They said they were on their way, but the signal was weak. Their voice cutting in and out like it didn't want to reach me here. The boy never came back. The only trace he left were faint smudges in the dust across the X, like someone had stood barefoot for a long, long time. The tow truck took just over an hour. Driver asked if I'd seen anything. I told him no. He didn't believe me, but didn't press. A few nights later, I was sitting on my porch when I heard something strange, faint scratching at the edge of the gravel drive. When I looked, there was nothing but the dark outline of the woods. Still, I walked down with a flashlight and followed the noise. Found a single bare footprint at the edge of the road, facing away from my house. Toes pointed downhill like whoever left it was walking back to the crossroads. I never saw the boy again, but I think he was waiting for someone that night. Maybe not me, maybe not yet. Story 4. Faces behind the lodge. Windows. It was late October when I drove that stretch near Dry Fork, the kind of night where even the deer seemed to stay still and watch. I'd left my brother's place in Wythe County after helping him split wood all afternoon, and I hadn't meant to stay that long. But we got to drinking and swapping stories until the light started bleeding out behind the pines. The drive home was about an hour if I took the ridge roads. I usually did. Less traffic, no cops. But that night, it was more about the quiet. There's a certain peace out there after dark. A kind of hush that settles over the hollers and makes you feel like you're passing through a memory that never belonged to you. About 15 minutes past the quarry, the road straightens out, flanked by nothing but open field on one side and woods on the other. No fences, no lights, just the long grey tongue of blacktop stretching out ahead. That's where I saw him, just standing there. At first I thought it was a hitchhiker, some drunk college kid maybe, head hung low, waiting for a ride that wasn't coming. But when my beams swept over him, everything in me froze up. His body was facing me, chest forward, feet planted square on the lines, but his head was turned completely around, chin resting crooked on his shoulder blades like it had always belonged there. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood in the dead center of the road like a sign no one could read. His arms hung limp, fingers curled slightly like they were holding something invisible, and his clothes didn't fit quite right. Too loose in some places, too tight in others, like he'd put them on from memory. The angle of the neck. It was impossible, and I say that as someone who's dressed bodies before, helped prep my uncle's funeral after the fall that broke him in 3 places. I didn't stop. I didn't slow. I swerved hard to the right, wheels catching loose gravel, the whole truck shuddering like it wanted to lie down and die. My rear view caught him for a second longer, still there, still backward, and then the dark swallowed him again. I told myself it was a trick of light, something about fog on the road maybe. Or maybe he'd been wearing one of those masks that covers the back of the head, some prank gone wrong. But I kept both hands white-knuckled on the wheel the whole way home, checking the mirrors too often, half expecting to see him standing in the truck bed, watching me through the rear window. When I got to the cabin, I locked everything. Door, windows, even the wood bin outside. I poured a shot of my uncle's corn liquor and sat by the stove, waiting for the shaking to stop. It didn't, not that night. The next morning, I drove back in daylight, just to see. I didn't really know what I was expecting. Footprints maybe, or some dumb kids filming TikToks. But the road was empty, no prints, no scuff marks, just dry pavement and a few dead leaves skittering along the edges like they'd seen something too. I asked around at the feed store later that week, mentioned it like a joke. Old Dennis just grunted and said, "You were near Dry Fork." Shouldn't stop for nothing on that stretch. That's all he said. No wink, no smirk, just kept weighing out grain. Thing is, after that night, I started seeing the figure again. Not in person, not like that, but in flashes, reflections. Once in the side mirror of my truck when I backed out at dusk, once in the freezer glass at the gas station, the same shape, same backward head. Each time it looked a little less like a person and more like a pose held too long, like he was waiting for someone to turn the world around him. I had dreams too, not nightmares exactly, but worse in some ways. In one, I'm walking that same stretch of road, alone. No car, just me and the asphalt and a sick feeling in my gut. I see him ahead, same posture, same twist of the neck, and I can't stop walking, can't look away. When I get close enough, he turns, not his body, just his head, spinning slowly like it's unhooked, and his mouth opens, but instead of a voice, I hear my own name, spoken from behind me. I wake up shaking, heart racing, like I've been running for miles. Last time it happened, the clock said 3:33. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. It's been a month now. I don't drive that road anymore. I take the long way even if it costs me an extra 30 minutes. But every now and then, I get that pull, the itch in the back of my mind like something's waiting out there, just off the road, just past the curve. Some nights when the fog gets thick and the pines lean in too close, I still see him, not standing anymore, just the outline, in the trees, in the glass, in places reflection shouldn't reach. And sometimes I wonder if he's still facing the wrong way, or if now, maybe, he's started to turn around. Story 5. The Elder at Midnight Turnpike Tea. Was a little after 1 when I left the mill, hands still raw from the rope and resin dust clinging to my sleeves. The machines had run long into the night, a busted belt on line 4 eating up 2 hours we didn't have. My eyes were gritty from the noise and the heat, and the thought of my bed back at the trailer on Cold Creek Hollow felt like a promise barely held together. I took the turnpike home, even though I usually don't that late. It's fast, but too empty for comfort. 2 lanes, no shoulder in most parts, and trees that press in too close. Like they're holding their breath just outside your headlights. I was rounding a low dip between mile markers 27 and 28 when I saw him. An old man standing by the roadside under a broken lamp. Not standing like someone waiting on a ride either. He was right there, half on the asphalt, half in the dark. He looked dressed for a Sunday funeral, not a weekday night. Loose suit jacket, crooked tie, one hand holding an old-style felt hat, the other raised like he was flagging me down. His shoulders were bent but not frail, just tired. Tired in the way someone gets from walking too far in the wrong shoes. I slowed. Not because I meant to, just instinct, I guess. My window creaked as it rolled down, and the air outside smelled wrong. Like copper and old tobacco, the kind you used to catch in your grandfather's barn after he passed and no one cleaned out the rafters. "You all right, sir?" I asked. He didn't answer. Just tipped his chin like he was trying to get a better look at me through the windshield glare. The shadows didn't want to give up his face, but I saw enough. Pale, deep-lined, not sun-weathered like most mountain folk, but peeled, almost. Like whatever skin he wore had seen more years in the ground than in daylight. I looked down to his hands and felt my throat close. The one holding the hat was pink at the fingertips and slick. Raw, like he'd been crawling on it. The nails were black with soil, The cuff of his jacket was wet, but not from rain. I opened my mouth to ask again, but just then, lights swept the curve behind me, another car climbing the bend. I turned toward it for a split second, blinked against the glare, and when I looked back, he was gone. Not walking away, not stepping back into the woods, just gone. The space he'd filled empty, the road silent as a sealed room. The other car passed me like I wasn't even there. No brake lights, no swerve, just steady on like they'd seen nothing at all. I sat for a moment, stunned, heart knocking in my chest. Then I rolled the window back up, pulled into gear, and drove home with my knuckles white on the wheel. I kept glancing in the rear view, half expecting to see him walking down the center line behind me, slow and sure like he knew I'd have to stop again sooner or later. The next morning, I checked the spot. Drove back in daylight with a thermos and a flashlight just to ease my mind. Nothing there, no hat, no prints, not even a smear where he might have stepped off into the ditch. But the lamp was still broken, glass scattered and rusted bolts poking out like ribs. And the trees by the road, they looked off, bent inward slightly like they'd been listening. That night, I didn't sleep well. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw that face again, frozen half in shadow. Dreamed I was driving past the same stretch over and over, like the road looped beneath me. Each time I passed the broken lamp, the old man was a little closer to the center. By the fourth loop, he was standing right in front of the car, and I woke up gasping, swearing I heard a slow tap on the trailer window. A few days later, I ran into Donnie Griggs at the diner. He used to work county roads, retired now but still nosy enough to keep tabs on the back channels. I asked him casually as I could if anyone had ever been hit out by mile 27. He squinted at me over his coffee, said back in the 70s there was a wreck during an early snow. Tractor trailer jackknifed, crushed a sedan into the guardrail. Elderly man behind the wheel died trying to crawl out before help came. Took him 2 days to find the body. Said his palms were worn to the bone from trying to drag himself toward the light. He asked why I was asking. I said I thought I'd seen a deer. I've kept that part of the road in my rear view since then, but it's not over, not really, because 2 weeks ago I came out to my truck for the night shift and found a hat sitting on the driver's seat. Same style, same dust on the brim. No footprints in the gravel. Doors still locked. Somewhere around 3 each morning, my headlights catch a shape just far enough ahead that I can't make out the face, but I know the stance. One hand raised, the other limp at his side, and though I don't stop anymore, I always slow, even just a little, because a part of me thinks if I don't, the next time I blink, he won't be on the side of the road anymore. He'll be in the back seat, waiting for the next stretch of dark. Story 6. The Silent Couple on Route 19. The rain was the kind that started without warning, just opened up over the ridge like someone had torn a seam in the sky. I was driving south on Route 19 after helping my uncle board up his porch down in Russell County. His place floods easy, and the creek behind it had already swallowed half the firewood. By the time I got back on the road, it was dark and getting colder. The kind of night where every curve feels sharper and the trees hang heavy, like they know you're alone out there. The road was slick with sheen, shining like black glass, and my wipers couldn't keep up with the rain. I slowed to a crawl around each bend, hands stiff on the wheel, headlights catching nothing but trees and the shimmer of water across the road. That stretch along the river is long and quiet. No houses, no shoulder, just asphalt and water on one side, forest on the other. I'd driven it 100 times before, but that night something felt off, like the woods were closer than usual. I passed the old rusted guardrail where the boat ramp used to be, and that's when I saw them. Two people, a man and a woman, standing dead center in the road, maybe 50 feet ahead, holding hands. My brights lit them up in full. They weren't soaked like me. Their clothes looked clean, pressed, not even clinging to their skin. She wore a pale dress like something out of a family photo. He had on slacks and a short-sleeved shirt with a wide collar, the kind you don't see anymore. They didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even turn their heads when the beams hit them square. My truck slowed to a stop without me meaning to. The wipers thumped a rhythm, but the couple just stood there, still as fence posts. I don't know why, but I didn't honk, didn't shout. I just stared, watching rain pour across my windshield while they stood untouched. Seconds passed, or maybe longer, I couldn't tell. My mind kept trying to make sense of it. Maybe some weird roadside photo shoot, or actors for a haunted house stunt. But no one films that far out, and certainly not in that weather. I blinked, wiped at the inside of the glass with my sleeve, and in that one blink, they were gone. Clean gone. No rustle, no movement, no sound. My headlights fell on nothing but wet road. I sat there, stunned, the engine humming soft like it was holding its breath. Then I noticed the footprints. 2 sets, bare, clean outlines in the sheen of rain. One set slightly larger than the other, both walking toward the woods. Not away from the road, but into it, into the darkest part, where the trees lean too close and the underbrush swallows light whole. I don't remember putting the truck back into drive, but I did. Eased past the spot where they'd been, eyes sweeping the trees for any hint of movement. Nothing stirred. By the time I made it home, the rain had stopped, but the dread hadn't. I kept thinking about how dry they looked, how their hands were clasped so neatly, fingers interlaced like 2 kids posing for a wedding picture. There was something too calm about it, something that didn't belong to a real moment. I didn't tell anyone at first, just buried it under work and routine. But it wouldn't leave me. Every time I drove that stretch, I'd slow near the bend where they stood, even in daylight. And more than once I thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye, a glimpse of white fabric or the glint of a button, all was gone before I could be sure. One evening, I pulled over and walked the tree line, looking for any kind of sign, a plaque, a trailhead, anything. Found nothing, just mossy ground and old roots curling like veins under the soil. Then, a few weeks later, I heard a story at the bar from a man named Lowell who used to run tow out that way. He said years back, a couple was hit by a semi late one night while trying to cross that same stretch on foot. Said they were headed to a revival across the river. Didn't see the truck coming around the bend in the rain. He never saw the bodies, just the wreck afterward. The rig tore the center line to gravel, but the cab barely had a dent. Both victims were found holding hands, even in death. I didn't say a word, just nodded and bought him another beer. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of those 2 standing in the rain came back, clearer than before. And I started to wonder if maybe it wasn't about haunting, maybe it wasn't about unfinished business. Maybe it was just a moment replaying itself over and over, a quiet ritual between 2 people who never got to finish their walk. The next time I passed that spot, I left the high beams off. Let the dark stay dark. I didn't want to see them again, but that didn't stop the silence from pressing in, or the feeling that just beyond my window they were still standing there, waiting for someone who might finally stop. Story 7. The Soldier on the Bend. It was near 2 in the morning when I hit that stretch of road skirting the base of Elkhorn Ridge, cutting east toward the Virginia line. I was hauling a flatbed back from Buchanan County after picking up a busted tiller my cousin swore he could fix, and the whole night had gone long. Rain delays, back road detours, bad coffee. By the time I got to the bend near Wolf Hollow, I was just trying to keep the truck between the lines. eyes bleary and jaw tight with the kind of tired that creeps into your bones. That road wraps itself around the edge of an old battlefield, nothing marked or fenced, just a soft horseshoe curve where the grass grows thick and the trees break wide like they're giving something space. Folks say a skirmish happened there, some forgotten clash not worth carving into the monument stones. But I remembered my grandfather pointing it out once when I was a kid, saying you could still hear the dead arguing in the soil if you listened long enough. I wasn't listening for anything. I was just trying to get home, so when I saw the figure up ahead, standing dead center on the yellow line, I didn't react at first, just eased off the gas and squinted. The man wore a dark coat that hung to his thighs, buttons running down the chest in a style I hadn't seen outside of books. He had a wide-brimmed hat tipped low over his brow, and boots caked in something dry and pale, like dust that had settled decades ago and never washed off. At first I thought it was a reenactor, maybe drunk or lost, but not at that hour, not in that place. No other cars, no lights but mine. As I rolled closer, something about his posture locked my spine in place. He wasn't waving, wasn't signaling for help, just standing with one arm stiff at his side, the other bent across his chest. The truck idled 10 yards out. I watched as he slowly turned his head, not his body. Just the neck swiveling like it had to remember how, and looked directly at me. His eyes caught the beams, but there was no reflection. No shine, just darkness where there should have been color, like his pupils drank in the light and held it. I didn't blink. I couldn't. His face was worn, but not in the way of old age. More like erosion. Lines cut deep, jaw slack, as if expression had long since left him behind. Then he lifted his right hand in a slow, deliberate salute. That's when my headlights went out. I don't mean they flickered, I mean full black. No dash glow, no marker lights, no engine sound. For half a second the entire world dropped into a silence so heavy it made my chest ache. I sat there frozen, breath fogging the inside of the windshield, heart pounding in a space that felt suddenly too quiet. And just as fast, everything came back. Lights on, engine humming, wipers tapping, but the road ahead was empty. He was gone. I leaned forward, half expecting to see him ducked behind the ditch or slipping through the brush, but there was nothing. Just road and trees and a single gust of wind that smelled faintly of black powder and rusted iron. Then came the sound, soft, like memory, like something metal scraping gently against itself. A faint ring, high and distant like bayonets clashing. Not loud, but near enough to make me shiver. I pressed the gas, careful but firm, and didn't stop until I hit the lights of town. I didn't tell anyone the next day, not because I thought they'd laugh, though some would, but because I didn't want to say it out loud. Saying it would make it real. And I didn't want this thing, this soldier, this echo following me home. A week later, I drove that same stretch in daylight. I thought it might help, seeing it with the sun out, dispel the weight of it. But the bend looked different than I remembered, smaller maybe, or older, like it had curled tighter in the night, as if the land itself didn't want to be seen too long. I pulled over just past the shoulder and got out, boots crunching on gravel, no wind, no birds, just that waiting hush that sometimes settles before a storm. I walked the center line, looking for footprints or anything left behind, but the only mark was a faint scuff of dark residue right where he'd stood. A stain on the asphalt that wouldn't scrub off with my boot. I stepped into the trees just a few feet and found the remnants of an old stone wall, half collapsed, covered in moss. Nearby, half buried in the leaves, lay the rusted edge of a canteen and what looked like a button. I didn't touch either, just stood there listening. That sound came, again, softer than before, like steel teeth brushing. I left before the wind could change. Now, every time I drive that way, I slow at the bend, even if it's broad daylight. I never play music through that stretch. I keep my lights on even in the morning fog, and I never, ever stop after dark. Not because I'm afraid he'll appear again, but because I'm afraid he's still there, standing watch, saluting something no one remembers, and maybe, next time, he'll be waiting for someone who salutes back. Story 8. The Girl Who Wouldn't Move. I was headed back from a friend's bonfire off Roaring Fork when I saw her. It was just after midnight, and the road ahead was empty, except for the way the hills breathed fog onto the pavement. You'd miss the dip if you didn't know it was there, just past a washed-out culvert at the edge of Bell Hollow, where every spring the water rises like it's reclaiming something. Folks call it the flood mouth. No guardrails, no street lamps, just gravel, dark trees, and the smell of river silt that never quite dries out, even in August. I was running on low beams, windows half down, engine humming in that steady way that makes you think too much. I'd almost forgotten the shape of the road when my lights caught her, a girl, maybe 8 or 9, standing right in the middle of the dip, pale Sunday dress, long wet hair clinging to her face. Her skin looked cold, but the air was warm. I braked hard, tires chirped on the gravel. My heart kicked once, then held. She didn't move, didn't run, didn't even flinch at the light or the squeal of brakes, just stood with her arms at her sides and looked up at me through the windshield, her eyes catching the beams in a way that made them look full of water. I rolled the window down and leaned out, asked if she was okay, asked if she needed help. My voice sounded too loud, too human. She didn't blink, just watched me, like she was waiting for something I hadn't said yet. Her dress was dry around the hem, but wet at the sleeves and chest, like she'd stepped waist deep into water and come back out slow. But the road was bone dry, and the culvert beside her hadn't seen water in weeks. There hadn't been rain in nearly a month. I sat there, foot still on the brake, trying to decide. Something told me not to get out, not to move at all. But it felt wrong to leave. She was just a child. And the nearest house was 4 miles back up the ridge. I reached for the door handle. She shifted. Just a twitch, her chin rising slightly like she was about to speak, but nothing came. No sound. Her mouth didn't open. Her eyes stayed locked on mine, and for a split second I thought she looked disappointed. I pulled the door shut and hit the gas. Not fast, just enough to roll past her. I kept my eyes forward, hands tight. As the truck passed, she stayed still. I could feel her presence to my left, just outside the window, watching. 100 yards down the road, I looked back. She was gone. No movement in the ditch, no shape in the brush. Just the empty dip, the same way it always looks after a flood clears out the debris and leaves behind silence. I didn't stop until I hit the gas station at the county line. Sat in the parking lot for 15 minutes, hands trembling around the steering wheel, trying to tell myself I hadn't just left a child standing in a flood path. But I didn't call it in, didn't tell the clerk. I drove home and didn't sleep. The next day, I returned to the spot in daylight, walked the dip, checked both ditches, the culvert, the trees. Nothing, no footprints, no scraps of cloth, no sign a girl had ever been there. I stood there a while, watching the stillness of it all, and realized something. It was too still. No bugs, no wind. Even the crows seemed to avoid that stretch. I asked around that week, careful how I phrased it. Most folks just shrugged. But one older man at the feed store lowered his voice and said, "That hollow's taken plenty, but it don't always give 'em back right." He didn't explain, didn't need to. That night, I looked up old county records. Found a clipping buried in an old flood assessment. Spring of '83. Girl lost near Bell Hollow. Car swept off the dip in a flash flood. Driver survived. Said his niece was with him. Door got stuck. Water took her before he could get her loose. They searched for 3 days. Never found the body. The girl's name was Lily. She was 9. I stopped driving that route after that. Found other ways home even if they added time. But still, some nights when I can't sleep, I think about her. I think about the way she stared through the windshield, not blinking, not afraid, just waiting. And what unsettles me more than anything is this thought I can't shake. She wasn't lost. She wasn't asking for help. She was waiting for someone. And what if it was me? Story 9. The Stranger with No Shadow. I was heading up from Boone just after first light, hauling a borrowed trailer back to Mountain City. Took the ridge road to shave off time, even though the switchbacks can make your knuckles white if you're not fully awake. The air was cold for late spring, the kind that makes the pine needles shiver on their own. I'd been on the road maybe 20 minutes, fog still dragging its feet in the hollers when I saw him. Just past mile marker 12, where the shoulder disappears into a steep drop, he was standing on the center line, not walking, not thumbing a ride, just standing. Tall, stiff posture. Long dark coat that hung too straight for the breeze that tugged at everything else. At first I figured he was just some early hiker waiting on a pickup, but then I noticed the shadow, or the lack of one. The sun was coming up over the ridge behind me, throwing shadows long across the trees and utility poles. Everything around him stretched east, tree limbs like arms across the pavement, but not him. Nothing fell behind his feet. No dark smudge beneath his coat. Just him standing in clean light like he didn't belong to the laws of the morning. I didn't slow, didn't even look directly at him. Just kept my eyes on the road and my foot on the gas. But as I passed, he raised his arm, not to wave, not to hail, just a slow lift of the hand, as though marking the moment. I kept my face forward, but I felt it, felt his gaze press in on the glass like warm breath on your neck. I told myself it was nerves, a trick of angle and fog. Maybe I missed the shadow because of the curve. But then I checked the side mirror just once. Just enough to be sure he wasn't stepping into the road behind me, and that's when I saw it. His reflection was there, in the mirror, moving. It shouldn't have been. He was behind me, a quarter mile back at least. But the outline of that long coat stayed pinned to the frame like it was keeping pace. No details, just a silhouette where there shouldn't be one. Every time I glanced, he was there. Not closer, not farther, just steady, like he was riding the air behind my wheels. The road wound tight through the ridge for the next 5 miles. Narrow lanes, no pull-offs. I didn't stop. I didn't dare. But even when the mirror shook from bumps or branches, his shape held steady, dark and tall and still. I made it to the county line before I finally blinked and saw nothing but trees again. No shadow in the mirror, no figure in the rear view. I told myself it was over, maybe my nerves, maybe some part of me that didn't like being alone on mountain roads before breakfast. But that night, I found something strange. My truck was parked in the drive, and when I stepped out onto the porch to grab the cooler I'd forgotten, I saw faint footprints on the gravel, long strides, narrow heels, too clean for boots, too precise for animal tracks. Just 2 impressions side by side, like someone had been standing there, watching. I checked the truck. No scratches, no mud on the step rail, but the side mirror had a smear, just a line, like someone had dragged a finger across the glass. Slow and careful. Over the next week, it kept happening, only on ridge roads, only in early light, Sometimes, while driving, I'd glance at the mirror and catch that shape again, just a flash. But enough to make me grip the wheel harder. He never moved toward me, never tried to stop me. But he was there, or something was. I stopped taking that route altogether. Even if it added 20 minutes, I took the lower roads through town. Less quiet, less alone. But even there, once or twice, I felt it. That same pressure behind my right ear, like someone leaning in to listen but not speak. Then, 3 nights ago, something changed. I was driving home after a late shift, not even thinking about the ridge, when I passed a man walking along the gravel shoulder just before town. He looked ordinary, work boots, canvas jacket, ball cap pulled low. But as I passed, something in my gut twisted. No shadow. The streetlights were behind him. The light hit every tree, lit up the fence posts and trash bins. But he didn't cast a single shape. Not even a blur. I checked the mirror. He wasn't there, not even his reflection. But I still felt him, closer than he'd ever been. That night, I woke to a tapping sound, soft, rhythmic, like something brushing against the porch rail. I crept to the window and looked out. The gravel was empty, but the mirror on my truck, just the driver's side, was turned inward, pointed toward the cab, like someone had adjusted it to look inside. Story 10. The One Who Followed the Car. I was coming back from a job site near Luray, headed south on an old back road that cuts past the edge of Hawksbill Ridge. The kind of road that doesn't show up clean on GPS. Just a pale thread winding through holler and tree line, pitted and narrow, no center stripe for half its length. It was well past midnight, and I'd stayed too long helping patch up a sagging porch for a man who still paid in cash and leftover stew. I was tired, the kind that sinks behind your eyes and makes you question things you know you saw. That stretch of road had always been strange to me, though I couldn't say why. Nothing ever happened there, just trees and hills and the hum of your own engine echoing back from the dark. I was easing around a bend, not going more than 30, when I saw him. A figure standing right on the crest of the road, tall, still, framed in the beams like he'd been waiting for someone. No motion, no flashlight, just a man in dark clothes standing on the crown, feet planted square, arms at his sides. I swerved left, nearly hit the ditch, tires catching loose gravel, missed him by inches. I didn't stop. My heart kicked into high and I checked the rear view, expecting to see him vanish into the dark behind me, but he didn't. He was still there, standing in the center of the road, same posture, same shadowless frame, watching. I stared too long enough that I nearly clipped the edge of the embankment. When I looked forward again, the road curved and the trees closed in for a moment, like a breath being held. When the stretch straightened back out, I checked the mirror again, and he was closer. Not running, not walking, just closer, still standing, still framed by taillights now. No sound, no flicker of motion, but every time I glanced back, he had gained distance, like the mirror was lying or something in the dark had bent. I sped up, 40, then 50. Road was too narrow for more, but I didn't care. That stretch had too many dips and blind spots to drive angry, but I drove it anyway. The faster I went, the more the trees blurred. But the man, he never changed. Always the same size in the glass, always the same shape. I couldn't see his face, couldn't make out more than an outline, but the shape of him, it stayed burned into my mind. I tried to reason it out, maybe a hallucination, maybe some trick of light or fog I hadn't noticed. Maybe the red of my taillights was catching some low-hanging branch just right. But then the road dropped downhill, and the lights of the next town flickered at the horizon, and he was still behind me, same distance, same silence. It felt like whatever this was didn't care about the road. or the car, or even the body I was in. It had picked me, and that was enough. When I finally hit the lights of the main highway, the mirror cleared. The space behind me showed nothing but road, not even headlights from another car. I pulled over at the gas station by the junction, engine still running, hands locked on the wheel. Sat there 10 minutes just listening to the tick of the engine cooling and the soft rattle of a wind that hadn't been there before. I didn't tell anyone. What would I say? That something followed me without walking, that it stayed in my mirror like a memory that wouldn't leave. The next night, I took the long way home, avoided the ridge road entirely. But even then, when I hit a stretch of road with no cars behind me, I found myself checking the mirror, just in case. And once, just once, I saw a flicker. Not a person, not even a shape, just a shift in the red glow, like something had moved between me and the taillights. I don't take night jobs anymore, not past that side of the county, not alone. And I don't trust my mirrors, not when the road gets quiet, not when the trees lean close, because I know what I saw, and I know he wasn't walking. He didn't have to.